This is the first video for section 5.3 on the orbit and rotation of Mars. What you're looking at in this figure is the Earth and its counterclockwise orbit around the Sun, and Mars and its counterclockwise orbit around the Sun. A couple of things to take note of. Of course, you know that the Earth takes 365 days to go around the Sun. Mars takes 687 Earth days. But since a day on Mars is just slightly longer than a day on the Earth, it takes fewer Mars days to go around the Sun. And so you should be prepared for either type of question. If I ask you how many Earth days is 1 year on Mars, you would say 687. If I ask you how many sols or Martian days does it take Mars to go once around the Sun, you would say 669. Now let's focus on this picture up here. One of the things you'll notice is that Earth's orbit is very nearly circular around the Sun. It turns out that any time you have an object orbiting another object, there is no such thing as a perfectly circular orbit. Orbits are always elliptical, and what that means is they're going to be just ever so slightly egg-shaped, or sometimes they're obviously egg-shaped. But in the case of the planets, it's a very subtle egg shape. Looking at the path of the Earth around the Sun, it looks very nearly circular. That's not quite true for Mars. Mars has the second most elliptical orbit of any planet in our solar system, second only to Mercury. Mars' orbit is very obviously elliptical. You can see in this part of the orbit, it's closer to the Sun. You can see in this part of the orbit over here, it's further away from the Sun. Now let me give you some numbers for that. This part of the orbit, where Mars is closest to the Sun, is called perihelion, and it's about 1.4 astronomical units. You may recall that an astronomical unit is the average distance between the Sun and the Earth. Another way to say that is that right here, Mars is about 50%, technically 40%, further away from the Sun than the Earth is. Over on the other side of its orbit, at aphelion, when Mars is furthest from the Sun, it's 1.7 astronomical units away. That's 70% further away from the Sun than the Earth is. This is pretty significant. Another thing this means, and we'll talk about this more in a later slide, is that if Earth and Mars line up with the Sun, you may recall that the word for three objects lining up in a row is syzygy. If we have Sun, Earth, and Mars all lining up during this perihelion, Mars is going to look significantly larger in our sky than when we have Sun, Earth, Mars lining up when Mars is at aphelion. And I'll show you a picture of that in the next slide.